Hey, welcome to the Healthy Postnatal Body Podcast with your postnatal expert Peter Lapp. That, as always, would be me. This is the podcast for the 3rd of July, 2022. And you know, date before music and all that sort of stuff means I have a guest on. Today's guest is Court Garfoot. She's a clinical nutritionist, and we are talking PCOS, Polycystic Ovary Syndrome, or ovarian syndrome. If you are that way inclined, that's fine as well. We're talking about what causes it, what is definitely not. How can you resolve it? How can diet help with that? What causes hormonal imbalances and all that sort of fun stuff. In short, it's a great episode, and Court is just the person to speak to. I was waiting for a fair while to get her on, and I'm delighted she came on. You're going to love this one, so without further ado, here we go. So you hear a lot of people talking about PCOS these days, but what exactly is it?
So PCOS it's kind of an umbrella term really that's being used at the moment to cover a few different things. But the diagnostic criteria at the moment is referred to as the Rotterdam criteria. So you need 2 of the following 3 criteria to be classified as having PCOS. So the first one is having oligo or an ovulatory cycle, so cycles that are greater than 35 days or shorter than 21 days. Mm-hmm. Hyperandrogenism, so there might be hirsutism, so male hair growth patterns on a female, so you typically see that around the sides of the face. Mm-hmm. And raised testosterone levels when hormone testing is done. And you might see polycystic ovaries on an ultrasound. The other interesting criteria based on the Rotterdam criteria for PCOS is that other causes of these must be excluded before it can be put down to PCOS. So adrenal conditions need to be ruled out, Cushing's syndrome, thyroid dysfunction, all need to be ruled out before you can come to a conclusion of PCOS, because they can impact the length of the cycle, the androgen levels, things like that. Mm-hmm. In terms of what's actually causing the PCOS, the research is really mixed at the moment. It's not often spoken about, but there are 4 different types of PCOS. So these are insulin-resistant PCOS, where high insulin levels tell the ovaries to make more androgens. So that causes the androgen levels to increase. You get that higher levels, like you get the appearance of male hair growth on a female, and it can throw out the length of the cycle. There's post-pill PCOS, where it's a temporary kind of PCOS that's caused after hormonal contraception, and that can be due to a range of things such as inflammation, vitamin and mineral deficiencies that have been depleted while using hormonal contraception, and also that communication between the brain and the ovaries being switched off while there's been hormonal contraception managing that cycle. They're still learning how to communicate again. So that can last anywhere from 3 to 12 months, and it should go back to what a cycle was pre-pill after that, but sometimes there will be a PCOS that's developed from that. There's inflammatory PCOS, where inflammation stimulates excess ovarian function, production of androgens. So that inflammation can be caused by environmental factors such as exposure to toxins, even things like cleaning chemicals, makeup, those kind of factors in our environments. It can be caused by stress increasing inflammation, gut microbiome dysbiosis can increase inflammation in the body, and it can also be caused by obesity. But that's a two-way street at the moment, where we're not sure if the obesity causes the inflammation or the inflammation causes the obesity. So that can go both ways. And then the fourth type is adrenal PCOS, where increased stress raises the DHEA, which is an androgen hormone produced by the adrenal glands. So that increases a different androgen hormone than the testosterone, but has a similar effect on the cycle to the other forms of PCOS. So that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but there's a lot of information in there because it can be really tricky to determine the type of PCOS because they can overlap.
Yeah, because that's fascinating, right? Because I've heard about PCOS for a while now, usually polycystic ovaries. I came across that first about 10 years or so ago. Now that started to crop up, and the discussion at the time, so these are not medical discussions, this would just say lay people chats. So someone would say, I have polycystic ovaries, therefore I can't lose weight. And the result was, because it was usually to do with like weight loss and all that sort of stuff. These things were often in the gym. And then they were saying, I have polycystic ovaries, so I can't lose weight. And the standard response at the time was, you just need to go on a low carb diet and you'll be fine. That was the only thing we ever knew about any sort of PCOS.
Yeah. And the polycystic ovaries is almost a fallacy because a polycystic ovary is an immature ovary that hasn't progressed into being the egg that gets used through the cycle. So depending on when an ultrasound is done, you might have multiple cysts if you're pre-ovulation because they're still fighting to pick the egg that's going to be used in the cycle. Whereas if you do a scan, we try to do a post-ovulatory scan around day 21 because typically a woman would have ovulated by then in a normal cycle. There shouldn't be polycystic ovaries that late in the cycle because we've already ovulated. Yeah. So it can be, that can almost be a false term to use. Say like, I've got polycystic ovaries. Well, there's so many more things that go into that. The weight loss can be a factor with PCOS because the insulin resistance is high and the inflammation can be high. So they're playing into the weight loss picture of someone having trouble losing weight. And a lot of the things that we look into from a nutritional perspective is addressing those drivers of the inflammation and the insulin resistance, and being you need a calorie deficit, but being really cautious about how far that deficit is because you don't want to place stress on the body, increase the cortisol, increase the stress hormones, increase the androgens, repeat the cycle.
Yeah, no, exactly, because that's the thing, isn't it? All the four types of PCOS, or at least three of them. And I don't make notes when I interview people. I need to listen more than making notes. But at least three of them are very much, they sound like they have certain lifestyle changes as a solution to the problem, rather than, I mean, if you look on the NHS website with regards to PCOS, the UK NHS website, this is, there's no cure, go screw yourself. I mean, I'm paraphrasing.
The most frustrating thing.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it boils down to. There's no cure and bloop. Right? There's nothing after that. And
to talk completely honestly on that, a lot of that advice in a medical sense comes from the fact that there's no medication that can be prescribed for PCOS. There is a whole lot that can be done in a holistic sense to improve PCOS. And it's like, it generally comes down to hormone, it's a hormonal imbalance because of these factors that have happened already. But that can be addressed and our hormones can change and fluctuate. Like, it's not a set in stone, this is how it is.
Yeah, no, exactly, because we all accept that hormones can change because, they change throughout the course of our lifetime, whether you're male or female, and that is just the way it goes. So then when we're talking lifestyle change, because usually what I find within the NHS and when it comes to illnesses or diseases and all that sort of stuff is that if there isn't a pill for it, they just go with eating better helps a bit because And from their perspective, and I interviewed a couple of GPs a while ago, they were like, yeah, because people aren't changing their lifestyles anyway, so there's no point in telling them to do that. Right? Which is a bit of a fatalistic attitude, but I understand their frustration. They see 2,500 people a year.
Absolutely.
At least 2,400 of them won't make any changes. But it can help.
And they're also in a situation where they see someone for maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's very transactional.
Yes, exactly. That is what they have. I don't have a pill to give you.
Yeah.
Google stuff yourself. That is usually what it kind of comes down to. Cool. So what sort of, because like I said, all these things are lifestyle changes. You talk a bit about environmental toxins,
absolutely,
stress levels. So where do you start when you have PCOS?
Yeah.
What should really your first step be to trying to resolve it? Because it sounds like a very broad spectrum of things that you could do.
Absolutely. I would start by, it depends a little bit on the type, but they all do have a stress and inflammation connection. So I would be looking to reduce stress where possible. Magnesium's a really interesting nutrient because our need for magnesium increases with stress because it can be a precursor for GABA, which is quite calming in the body. But when we're stressed, we deplete our body of magnesium. We just lose it. We can't use it at the same time. So our need for it increases even more. So introducing magnesium, modulating the stress response, reducing environmental toxins can be really beneficial as well. So looking towards natural cleaning products, natural skincare products, those factors that just reduce that load on the body. There's also some really interesting food as medicine hacks almost that you can do, particularly addressing the insulin resistance. So vinegar is really good for reducing the blood glucose spike after eating foods. And there's some really great research around that as well. And that covers all types of vinegar. That doesn't particularly have to be apple cider vinegar or anything in particular. So having, apple cider vinegar as a salad dressing or a balsamic vinegar in a vinaigrette as a salad dressing can really help balance those blood glucose levels after a meal and help reduce those androgen levels, reduce the inflammation. Cinnamon's another one that can help reduce Cinnamon's another one that can help balance blood glucose levels and reduce that spike after a meal. So we often recommend people to have a porridge with cinnamon in the morning because it's a really great way to get the digestive system flowing, and that cinnamon will also help modulate the immune system. High fiber foods are also really great because they slow down the digestion, and a lot of low GI foods are recommended for people with PCOS because they slow that digestion down and reduce those glucose spikes, which, as I've spoken about, reduce those high insulin levels that cause inflammation and high androgen levels. So I would be really looking at reducing stress, reducing environmental toxins, and making a few dietary changes to help manage those glucose levels throughout the day. And as you've touched on, exercise is also great for people with PCOS, and exercise plays into that stress response as well. I always say that the best type of exercise is one that you enjoy because you're not going to stick to a routine that you hate doing. From the research, aerobic and resistance training improves insulin sensitivity and decreases the androgen measurements in women with PCOS. But once again, if it's not something you enjoy, go do something you enjoy because it's going to be better for your mental health and everything else as well.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something I always say. You're better off doing Zumba 7 times a week than HIIT once a month, right? That's the type of exercise. The type of exercise you can stick to is the type of exercise you kind of should be doing. Everything else is shits and giggles. Everything else is just for fun. In an ideal world, there are certain ways to train, but let's be honest, training is exercise is a pain in the bum sometimes. So just find something you enjoy doing. That's what you stick to. It's really interesting because when you say, because these are all fairly straightforward lifestyle changes, as in, add a bit of cinnamon, do a bit of headspace or whatever, there's free meditation stuff on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Go for a walk and all that sort of stuff.
Get that green space, that fresh air.
Yes, all that sort of dog. That's basically what Court is saying. Get yourself a dog and walk the thing. It's a lot of the advice that I see floating about with regards to PCOS is, let's say, fairly extreme in its approach. You have to completely change your lifestyle. So you go from, which assumes that people have a terrible diet to begin with, but you have to go much more towards the clean eating side of the spectrum, rather than making loads of small changes that stack up. Now, the question is then, of course, how long does it take before people see results from any of those sort of things? Because if you go extreme, you can't stick to that for too long.
Yeah, that's correct. It takes 3 months to make an egg.
Right.
So any changes that we're looking at making hormonally and improvements we're looking at making to the cycle typically take about 3 months to see an improvement. So yeah, as you're saying, if you go too hard too soon, you're not seeing out the end of that 3 month period and you're not seeing the results of it.
Yeah. Exactly.
It can be really interesting. Like I know, like period pain actually isn't a symptom of PCOS, which is a really important differentiator because a lot of people are like, I've got period pain, I must have PCOS. It's actually not a symptom of PCOS. But if you're having an increase in PMS and those kind of cycle symptoms, looking back 3 months to something that changed, was there a stressful life event? Did you make a change in your diet? Can be really interesting to see what is happening now.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. So would you recommend people, obviously working with a professional is always my go-to, right? I always tell people,
absolutely,
look, find a professional and just ask them the questions, ask them for the assistance so they can guide you through the process rather than, blindly stabbing in the dark and hoping you end up with the right conclusion. But when would you recommend that people that start working on their PCOS, so that start making dietary changes and stress changes, that they start keeping a journal from that stage so that they remember, because I don't know about you, but for me, most of the clients that I work with have no idea what they felt like 3 months ago.
Definitely. I'm just going to go back. I've just remembered something around that, making drastic changes. When I was doing some research around PCOS, I was really interested to see if there was any research into the keto diet and PCOS, because it's often spoken about being, high fat, low carb, and with the, blood glucose issues around PCOS, I was like, this is going to be really interesting. Only in extremely obese cases is keto recommended with PCOS, because in those cases it does help regulate the blood glucose levels.
Sure.
However, in the majority of the population, keto places too much stress on the body and then doesn't reduce the androgen levels. So by going too hard, you do risk increasing the stress level and counteracting the good work that you're doing.
Yeah, and this really ties in with what we mentioned earlier, wasn't it? With regards to you need to go high fat, high protein, low carb sort of thing, which used to be the standard advice. And I've done bits on keto before. I'm diet agnostic as like to go. I don't care what diet people go on as long as it's good for your health. Whatever floats your boat. I don't have an opinion, right? With regards to at least health. I mean, I train people for health, and I care about people's health. And if they say, I need to lose weight, then however you want to go about it is fine, as long as you do it in a healthy way and you don't take the Joe Rogan approach and you eat elk for 3 months or something like that. and just supplement your way to health or take Slim Fast and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
But for keto, I think a lot of people like keto because it's very simple. As in, you cut out the boring bits from your plate, and you have keto.
You had cheese.
Yes, exactly. You add cheese and you add steak, and you basically you cut out. Keto is almost for children in that.
Yeah.
you cut out the things you don't really want to eat, and you just eat eat all the tasty things that you want. That cannot, in the long run, be a healthy approach for most people. I think we can all accept that. It might be great for weight loss in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it may well, when you're talking about very obese people with PCOS, the reason, I mean, in some cases, I have one client, my one personal training client, because I still have a little PT business, who used to be 400 pounds. When he came to me, he was 400 pounds, like 7 months ago. All that matters for that guy is weight loss. Right? Is in the beginning, the best way to improve his health is just by getting the pounds off and getting the fat off. Keto is awesome for that. Simply because, I eat a steak, I'm full. I eat 2 chicken breasts, I'm full. So you drop your calorie intake that way.
Absolutely.
And then you have the whole faff about doing it properly. Keto works. I've had people on before talking about keto, and it works, but it's a lot of hassle to do it in a healthy way. Because you still need to get your vitamins and your minerals and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
So when you're talking inflammation, because inflammation again is a really popular buzzword, right? On Instagram, it can lead you down some dark rabbit hole. Let me tell you, you start off just looking at inflammation, then before you know it, you're following Dr. Mark Hyman, which is again is fine. He's not wrong on many levels, and then before you know it, the algorithm sends you down everything is evil and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
What sort of things are you looking at when you're talking inflammation? Are we just talking having a few more blueberries?
So inflammation is an immune response in the body. So we're all familiar with you've hurt your hand or your wrist and it's inflamed because the immune system is trying to protect. As a society, we currently have increased inflammation because our immune system is overreactive to a whole lot of things. And this is what we're talking about in this situation is systemic inflammation. So it's internal inflammation throughout the body. And this inflammation can be caused by foods that can cause it, like increase inflammation, which are the opposite of your anti-inflammatory foods or your inflammatory foods. And in a standard Western diet, we have a lot of inflammatory foods. So these can include things like wheat, dairy, sugar. I'm not sure what your wheat is like in the UK. In Australia, our wheat is very different to the wheat in Europe, where it is processed differently. And therefore is easier to digest. So a lot of people in Australia will find that they're gluten intolerant, but they can eat all the pasta in Italy.
Oh, wow.
Because it is processed differently. And so, it's processed differently. Ours is harder to digest, which causes more inflammation. The amount of chemicals that are in our food is significantly more than there was 20 years ago. Sure. And that increases toxin load in our body and increases that inflammation. So when we're looking to reduce inflammation, my first step is generally to take out foods that can increase inflammation in the body. So we're looking at wheat, dairy, sugar, and alcohol are my go-tos when we're looking to reduce inflammation. And then if we can, increasing our anti-inflammatory factors, like, the blueberries with the antioxidants. Turmeric can be great as well as an anti-inflammatory. The dosage can be interesting with turmeric. You typically have to have quite a high amount for it to be helpful. And ginger can be an anti-inflammatory in small doses. So I find a great like a tea in the morning with ginger, lemon, and honey. Really great, easy to implement anti-inflammatory approach to reducing that inflammation in the body.
Yeah.
And then, taking out those inflammatory factors. A lot of fast food is so, like, the amount of processing that goes into it, your fried chips, fried burgers, there's a whole lot of inflammatory factors in those that aren't great for overall health. But I am very much an advocate for there is no bad foods. So you can have foods in moderation, like eating carrots all day, every day is bad. Like any food is bad in excess.
Yeah.
You can have too many carrots. But by balancing it out and, having those occasional foods occasionally, you're able to manage your diet really well balanced and really well.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing because basically it was going to be one of my questions about something you mentioned earlier. It is likely, I'm not saying this is an absolute, but it is likely that things like PCOS and any sort of inflammation response, the reason that there's more of it now is because our lifestyles are significantly different from the way they were 20, 30 years ago.
Our lifestyles do not support health.
No, they really, really don't. And it's interesting, a couple of things that you mentioned to change in the UK. I don't know what it's like in Australia. In the UK, drinking culture is kind of an issue. British drinking culture is a real issue. It's the one thing a lot of my clients and members just, I mean, obviously I deal a lot with postpartum women, and God love them, right? But one or two too many want to go back to, I can have a glass of wine again. as soon as they're medically cleared to do so.
Yes. Yeah. And I think our issue with that is that we use it to relax.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have appropriate, and yeah, I'm going to go a bit off topic here in terms of PCOS, but our vagus nerve is, and I don't know if you've spoken about this on the podcast before, but the vagus nerve is the connection between the brain and the digestive system. The digestive system then is connected to so many other parts of the body. So it's the vagus nerve. There's actually two of them. They run down either side of the neck, that are responsible for calming down after the fight or flight response. And a lot of us don't have adequate so tonality is the word that's used, but adequate use of that vagus nerve to be able to calm down after a stressful response. So we have a stressful day at work, and then we take it home, and then the kids say something, and we haven't turned off that stress response yet. Yeah. Like, we're still running up here, and we can't keep running up there, which is why the body tries to adapt and things happen when they're not supposed to happen. And then we have a drink of alcohol, which slows the body down. It's a depressant. And, we can breathe again and I feel calm again, because that's what we're relying on when we can do breathing exercises to activate the vagus nerve. We can do cold showers to activate the vagus nerve. Holding an ice pack on your chest can activate the vagus nerve to decrease that stress response and help modulate that inflammation and all the other factors that go with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always say that for most people, not everybody, but for most middle-class people in the UK, the glass of wine at the end of the day sort of people. And, if you're listening, you know who you are. It's almost a Pavlovian response. As in,
agreed.
I have a glass of wine and therefore I can relax. Rather than, when you're talking about alcohol, is a depressant and all that sort of, but it's almost just the act of having the wine there drives that relaxation much more than the physical act of drinking the alcohol, if you know what I mean.
Agreed.
You can almost, and I also always used to say this about coffee. There are two types of coffee drinkers in the world. In my opinion, there are the people who suffer from anxiety, who just should not have coffee. I think it's a really bad idea if you suffer from anxiety to add a stimulant like coffee.
Absolutely.
Especially empty
stomach. The nervous system's already activating. Let's get it going even more.
Exactly, yes. And especially early morning, I need my black coffee
on an empty stomach.
On an empty stomach. It's horrible. It's on all levels. But then you have the people, the Italians of the world, so to speak, and or people with that disposition to coffee, they have an espresso, a double espresso.
Yes.
But they relax whilst drinking it. They take half an hour over a small double espresso. And this is not Starbucks level quality. It is better than that. But they sit and they relax.
They appreciate it.
And therefore they do not get the same response from the caffeine that someone who drinks that stuff in an agitated state does.
Yes. Yeah. There's a level of mindfulness in that. And I don't know what the situation is in the UK, but in Australia, there's been a significant increase in probably the last 12 months in non-alcoholic drinks.
Oh, right.
A lot more non-alcoholic. Like it's quite accessible now to get a non-alcoholic gin and tonic.
Yeah.
Non-alcoholic wines have increased their quality phenomenally.
Yeah.
And I will quite often just take non-alcoholic drinks when I'm out, if I'm somewhere where people are drinking. So that's also an option for people because no one can tell that you're not drinking. And it still gives that Pavlovian response of people think you're having a drink, you're either relaxing or having a good time, whichever way it's going. But there's no alcohol involved. So for people who are conscious of that, that's a really good option to have.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that because I genuinely hadn't even heard of non-alcoholic gin, so I'm just having a look now. Because to be honest, it's been a while since I last had a drink because I can't be bothered. It's genuinely what it is for me. Whenever my wife wants to go out, she says, let's go out for a meal. Yeah, excellent. I'll drive because I can't be bothered taking taxis and I'm cheap. I don't want to take a bus or a train. And we stay too far out to walk. So I'll drive and therefore I don't drink. But a lot of people in that are going towards, because it's interesting, and this ties in with PCOS and the inflammation response. A lot of my clients are switching to gluten-free.
Yes.
Especially with alcohol. Beer, gluten-free beer is a big thing.
Yeah.
But now, of course, there's some issues around wheat and gluten for some people. Not everybody, but before I get dietitians writing in, because that always happens when I bring up wheat or gluten. I always find that if you don't respond well to certain foods, those are the foods you cut out of your diet. And that is a completely personal thing. Like you said, there's no such thing as a good food or a bad food. But I used to have a client who couldn't look at an apple without getting a blood sugar spike. She was fine with mangoes. She was fine with all the strawberries, all the fruits that we would associate with it. But an apple was like, boom, straight in there. So that's different for for everybody. But when you're talking I take it that, going gluten-free beer is still, you're better off going for a non-alcoholic beer, so to speak, with regards to your body's response.
Yeah, I would say so. It's a tricky one, like with the going gluten-free, because once again, there's two types of gluten-free. You can go gluten-free and cut out gluten and be having zucchini noodles and be having salads instead of sandwiches and things like that. Or you can go gluten-free and buy gluten-free bread and buy gluten-free flour and buy gluten-free like biscuits and eat your normal diet but be gluten-free, which those commercial gluten-free products have a chemical load most often. Yeah. So you do need to weigh up between the two what works for you and what works for your body.
Yeah, because what you're essentially saying with everything that you were saying with regards to change in diet, and this is, and I know, and this is boring to most of my listeners, but we're basically going back to healthy eating from 20, 30 years ago, aren't we? I mean, that's the way our parents used to eat before McDonald's came in. And
absolutely.
I'm old enough, you're clearly not. I'm old enough to remember when microwave meals became a thing. in Holland. As in, they appeared on television in American television shows, and we're like, oh, this is magic. And then in Holland, and they were all disgusting. They were all terrible for younger listeners, as in anyone under 40. Basically, microwave meals used to really, really suck. And I get that they're better.
Yeah.
They're tastier now, but they're not much healthier now than what they used to be. And
it's those convenience factors that are increasing our inflammation. We had a very interesting conversation in clinic today because one of our magnesium supplements is chocolate flavored.
Right.
And I had a client say, can I make a hot chocolate with it? And I was like, oh, let me check that we can heat this. Like, I love your thinking, but let me just check this out. And so we called the rep and she was like, yep, it's fine to be heated. Don't have it scalding hot, but you can heat it, but do not microwave it. Because microwaving it changes the chemical structure and you will lose therapeutic benefit. I was like, okay, that's really it's impressive that it can be heated, but you can't microwave it. Yeah.
Well, this is the interesting thing, and you've got Frankie, your dog, and everybody listening to this knows that Buddy and Kitty are here. That's what that light snoring was for listeners. That's what the light snoring was in the beginning. It was just Buddy. My dogs will not eat microwave chicken. As in chicken that I cooked yesterday that I microwaved, they're not touching it. If I just put it in the pan to warm it up or the oven, they're completely fine with it. And I'm not saying my dogs know best, right? They do, but I'm not saying that. But there's a bit of a clue there with regards to what I always, I always think. If
I mean, and like, don't get me wrong, I use a microwave when it's convenient.
Sure.
I'm not anti-microwave. But there was an interesting study done where they had some plants, and one lot of plants were watered with straight tap water. Mm-hmm. The other lot of plants were watered with water that had been microwaved and then cooled down. And the plants with the microwave water died. Mm-hmm. Because that radioactivity affected the chemical structure of the water. Yeah,
and it'll probably, because it was heated and therefore some of the nutrients will have left and all that sort of stuff. It's a filtration sort of thing. With regards to because when we're talking about cooking and all that sort of stuff, because it's interesting, because when you mentioned one of your supplements is chocolate flavored, that's a chat I had with somebody the other day. Just out in the non-internet world, in the real world, so to speak, we're talking kefir. So we're talking about the probiotic kefir, the yogurt drink. And the most popular seller in the UK is a company called Biotiful. And that lady started up a few years ago. She was on the ball. There were 10 years ago, kefir was for crunchy people. You had to grow it in your kitchen, right? You had the little culture ball,
the beads,
you had to add milk and all that sort of stuff to it. And this lady was like, "No, this is going to be a thing. I'm starting up a business," and she's done a wonderful job with it. But her most popular flavor is Morello cherry.
Yes,
and because people do not like sour milk, essentially, and that is that's a thing in Holland. In Holland, kind of milk is a thing, and we've had that for decades. And the Turks have had kefir, of course, for ages.
Yes,
that's kind of where it comes from, that neck of the world. But in the West, so to speak, so UK, US, definitely, probably Australia as well, things have to come with a flavor to make it palatable.
Absolutely.
Now, as soon as you add any sort of that type of flavoring into a commercially available product where costs become a consideration.
Yes.
And if you grow kefir by yourself and you make that and you throw a strawberry in, you blend that whole thing up, that is not the same as what they're selling in the supermarket.
Absolutely.
So do those things then undo the good work of the things that you're taking? Was a conversation we were talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we often have this conversation about salad dressing.
Yeah.
As nutritionists, should I be worried about the calories in my salad dressing? I'm like, well, if it means you're going to eat a plate of vegetables, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, I don't care. in terms of the kefirs and the kombuchas of the world, if you like, they're not usually that beneficial to your gut microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people will find that if you do have dysbiosis, so an imbalance of the bacteria in your gut microbiome, you get an upset tummy from them because your body doesn't know what to do with them.
Sure.
And your digestive system has to be working properly to be able to take on probiotics, because if there's too much bad bacteria, there's no room, like the house is full.
Sure.
Like, move on. So there's got nowhere to live. So yeah, like I don't think there's too much wrong with adding flavors to those drinks, but I don't think people are getting the benefit from them that they think they are. The gut microbiome is really interesting when you go back to that inflammation piece that we're coming back to today, because there's bacteria in the gut microbiome that can increase inflammation. There's bacteria there that can crave sugar. So a lot of the cravings will come from those bacteria needing sugar to survive. They're small, but they're very vocal. But so a lot of people will think that, we know like gut health's been a big talk for the last few years and we need to increase the good bacteria, but they don't realize that in order to increase the good bacteria, there's sometimes a need to decrease the bad bacteria.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And that's that can be a starve off process, or you can use supplements or herbs to kill them off. But that process really needs to be worked through with a practitioner, because you don't want to be accidentally increasing the bad bacteria and convoluting the problem again. I haven't seen too much research into it, but I'd be interested to see if there is in the next few years some more research into the gut microbiome and PCOS, just because the insulin resistance picture that's forming. There's a little bit of research around at the moment around the gut microbiome and type 2 diabetes. So I'll be interested to see if anything develops there. There's obviously the inflammation picture. Stress impacts the microbiome. So I'll be interested to see if anything comes out there in terms of particular strains of bacteria that are associated with the hormonal picture that we see in PCOS. There's all, like estrogen, for example, is a very opportunistic hormone. And so when the liver is focused on detoxifying other things out of the body, estrogen just goes around again.
Right.
So it builds up in the system. And an estrogen dominant picture isn't typical of PCOS, but while the liver's distracted, hormones are running rampant.
Yeah.
So it's alcohol takes so much effort for the liver to digest. So as soon as we bring that into the picture, hormones go out of whack in every respect. So it'll be interesting to see if that gut microbiome picture develops around those factors that we're seeing with PCOS.
Yeah, because that's fascinating, isn't it? Because and again, apologies to all the listeners that have listened for the past 160 episodes, because I've spoken about this before. It's when we're looking at normal medicine stuff, as in stuff you go to your GP for, we tend to get a narrow solution, as in, this is what's wrong with you, let me treat this one single thing. And very rarely would they take a more holistic approach. So when you're talking about and the kefir example and the kombucha example is a perfect one in this case, because a lot of people take it not in the way that, because I buy kefir, I talk about it a lot, it works wonders for me, but that's because my diet overall is pretty good.
Yes.
If I have a junk food diet and I buy a bottle of kefir once a week or something like that. Yeah. Or remember Yakult? Is that a thing in Australia?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. That's been kicking around for decades. Right? Right? The hundreds of good bacteria or the millions of good bacteria in the thing. You have your little Yakult shop and all that sort of stuff. And then you go have your burgers and your pizza and whatever. Yeah, that little shop isn't doing that much for your health. And it's the same with when you're talking about the gut biome and all that sort of thing. I did an interview with Dr. Hugh Pharma, who has a PhD in all this microbiome stuff. So he knows what he was talking about.
Absolutely.
And he was like, yeah, it's very clear, but your lifestyle habits determine what your microbiome is. Like much more so than minor interventions do. And cutting out alcohol or cutting drastically down on alcohol for British listeners, just not drinking every day, or not even necessarily drinking every week, will have a much more beneficial impact on your health with regards to liver function, with regards to hormonal balance and all that sort of stuff, than taking a small supplement would do.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where it comes back to making those series of small changes rather than doing, a drastic overhaul of the diet without addressing those environmental toxins and those stress factors that all play into that hormonal picture.
Yeah. See, we always come full. It always goes sooner or later when you talk to people that know what they're talking about. They always come back to and this was my original point. Just change your lifestyle a little bit in many ways. Cool, that was awesome, Court. Was there anything else?
But it's I think I just wanted to touch on that. It's interesting when as a holistic practitioner, having the opportunity to go in depth with a client in a consult, really, because you can't address these factors by only looking at diet or only looking at environmental factors or only looking at the medication someone's taking. It needs to be a holistic approach, looking at all those different factors to improve the health. And it can be small changes in each area, but you need that holistic picture.
Oh, no, absolutely. I completely agree. I think, and this is the difference between, when I say work with a professional, I don't mean talk to your GP. And I genuinely don't. And there's nothing wrong with GPs or anyone in the health system.
No, they have their place in the health system.
And they're awesome. And they know much more than I do about many, many things other than postnatal health. But when I'm talking about working with a professional, I mean, don't try to figure this stuff out by yourself. But the amount of people always say working with, because you do online consultations and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't. The amount of time that people would save by just getting a consult with you, rather than Googling and researching. I mean, you spent a few years studying stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So you that's what you pay for, people. This is why I always say work with a professional rather than, what works for your friends is awesome if it works for them, but that's not necessarily the same thing as that works for you, because your starting point is different. Your environmental factors are different.
Absolutely. And there's also a difference in there's such a range of supplements, such a range of quality of supplements, the dosage, the bioavailability, so how easily they are absorbed in the body, the cofactors that that they come with that are needed to absorb something in the body. It's so I 100% recommend seeing someone who has knowledge in that area rather than trying a heap of different supplements from the chemist and nothing working. It might not be that, that supplement's not right for you. It just might be the wrong dose or the wrong time of day that you're having it.
Yes, because people believe it or not, and I know a lot of people don't believe me when I say it, but dosage really matters for stuff.
Absolutely.
I had this chat on,
and that's so you go.
Yeah, sorry. I had this chat with somebody not that long ago where they say everybody just takes X amount of whatever medication, because people don't get weighed and all that sort of stuff as much when they go to the GP. So every time my dog goes to the vet, first thing they do is throw him on a set of scales. And then they say he weighs 10 kilos. That means he needs X amount of medicine.
Yes.
And dosage has a real, and this is what I mean with what works for your friend doesn't necessarily work for you, because you're not the same person as your friend is. You might be bigger, you might be smaller, male, female, it all matters. And someone who knows what they're talking about, such as your good self, will be able to guide you through that process much, much quicker and actually save you a ton of money.
Definitely.
Because you're not buying loads of useless stuff. And indeed, it's exactly what you said. If people's we spoke about magnesium a lot on the podcast recently.
Yeah.
Everybody brings up how important it is.
Yeah.
But if you take magnesium in too small a dose and you think, this doesn't work for you, it doesn't do anything, then it's chances are that everybody else who comes to you later on that says, actually, magnesium is really good for you. I've tried that, it doesn't work. And therefore, you will spend years fighting something that is actually beneficial. And the time you waste, and it always comes down to this for me, the time you waste is the one thing that you just can't get back. Years, you'll know people that have been struggling with PCOS for years. Actually, they had the solution 3 or 4 years ago. They just weren't aware that they had the solution because they didn't have someone like you helping them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So on that happy note, obviously you're at Court Garfoot, and I will link to your website and all that sort of stuff. In the notes for all the listeners. Yeah, that's where you find it. And you can even get a hot chocolate recipe on her website. So it's not all bad. Was there anything else you wanted to touch? Was there anything else?
No, that's all good. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to chat.
Lovely. On that note, I will press stop record. And as always, press stop record is exactly what I did. Thanks very much to Court for coming on. It was absolutely wonderful. It was great talking to her. Like I said, she's the person to speak to. You can find her in many places. Court Garfoot, that's Court, learn to spell Peter, Garfoot.com, where you can basically, that's her website. She's on LinkedIn and Instagram. I will link to absolutely everything. Like I said, it's always lovely to have someone come on the show that really knows what they're talking about, and I can just be the idiot that asks all the questions, and some of them you might even want the answer to, right? I hope you found it useful. Definitely check out courtgarfoot.com. In the news this week, because there was nothing interesting in the news this week. I would like quickly, I'll just mention this. It's Wimbledon this week. That's always nice. I hope you're enjoying Wimbledon. Tatjana Maria just won her way into the quarter final. Mother of two, 34 years old. So remarkable, well done to her. It basically just shows you that, as I just posted on Instagram, that with the right team around you, with the right exercises, there is no reason at all why you can't be stronger postpartum than you are prenatal. Well, you can't, or at least almost be at the same level. This will be her first quarter final of any Grand Slam, as far as I remember. And it kind of just shows you that I've done something with Joe Pavey a long time ago for BBC Radio Scotland about older mums. And Joe also won her Commonwealth medal, gold, if I recall correctly. Gold. I'm sure it was gold. By the time she was 40 or something like that. Well, when she was 40 years old, when she just given birth a little while before that. It just shows you that if you have a right team of people around you, you do the right exercises, there is really no reason why your postpartum body cannot be at the same level of performance as your prenatal body was. In fact, in a lot of my clients' cases and a lot of HPMB member cases, they find that it's stronger postpartum than it ever was prenatal. So, put the effort in. I hope these women, you catch one or two of these successes, and that it's not just about aesthetics, but that you just realize that this is about performance, and that these women are showing you that what they can do, you can do. I was going to quote someone there, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave that hanging. Anyways, you have a tremendous week. New bit of music for you coming up. And I think I'm just doing one by myself next week, but you never know. There might be something coming up. Peter at healthypostnatalbody.com. If you have any questions, healthypostnatalbody.com. If you would like your 3 months free postpartum exercise, it doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to sign up for anything after that. You can just cancel on day one. You still get 3 months free. Remember that. And of course, as always, tell your friends. You have a tremendous week. Quarter Finals of Wimbledon, baby. It'll be great fun. All right. See you next week. Bye now.
Let's play this out like it's forever, ever, ever, yeah. You and me together, yeah. There ain't nothing better, yeah. Let's hold this like it's now or never, ever, ever, yeah. You and me are tethered like forever, ever, ever, yeah. I can see it with my eyes closed. I can feel you near. In the next room over, when you're not here. My fire when it gets cold. Atmosphere burning up when you come close. I hope you never disappear. I'll be in it till stars go quitting, and even then I'm with you. When things go dark, I'll be where you are. We can make it if you want to. Let's play this out like it's forever, ever, ever, yeah. You and me together, yeah. There ain't nothing better, yeah. Let's hold this like it's now or never, ever, ever, yeah. You and me are tethered like forever, ever, ever, yeah. I can see it with my eyes closed. I can feel you near. In the next room over, when you're not here. My fire when it gets cold. Atmosphere burning up when you come close. I hope you never disappear.